Trial attorney Jamie White. And Jamie, I want to run something by you. In my mind, if there's going to be an acquittal in this case, I have the feeling that it centers on Chad Cobb, because the defense's theory is there's this conspiracy between Chad Cobb, his mom, and they've even included the daughter by sort of influencing her. And with Chad Cobb's testimony being so erratic, so sort of off the wall, very much incredible, once that falls, I look at it like sort of this Jenga. That's the one that when they pull that out, maybe the entire case falls. Is that something you can agree with?
I do, Michael. I think that you've really hit the nail on the head, and I think the defense did a decent job of educating the jury on what reasonable doubt means. And I used to use this this metaphor before a jury would go out, and I would use the scales of justice and literally hold my hands up and suggest to the jury that if the evidence, if the prosecutor's evidence doesn't fall to the table, if the scales don't fall and hit the table, if they're kind of balancing back and forth, then that is reasonable doubt. And I think when you take Mr. Cobb's testimony and look at it in its totality, it's very difficult to get there from my point of view. And I think that's probably what the jury's hung up on, at this point in time.
Yeah, I think when you connect Chad Cobb to the mom's testimony, to the daughter's testimony, I think they all sort of fall under the weight of his, incredibility. I want to play a quick piece of tape here, Jamie. This is, and we talked about this earlier, but I want to play it again because I want to discuss it in a different light, where the defense attorney, he has to deal with this idea of a phone call that was made, right? And he has to tell the jury, if it was a woman's voice, which we know it was, who could that woman be? And here's his explanation for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, with respect to the phone call that Mr. Travis received at the pizza shop, he tells us that it's a female, and yet he's pretty sure that it's not a male. Well, you also heard that from the Verizon person that there are cell towers, not only close to that 647 West Turkey Foot, but there are also cell towers out in Rittman and Doylestown. And who would be living in the Rittman, Doylestown that is a female that you've heard her name many, many times during this closing argument and doing the testimony? And that person would be Cindy Cobb.
Now, Jamie, when we talk about this road to acquittal, this is, to me, is another important part in that, because the phone call was a real difficulty for the defense, and they had to give some plausible theory. Now, do I think it's plausible? No. But just throwing the idea out there, I think, is extremely effective.
This piece, I think the defense made a mistake here, Michael, in my opinion. I think that sometimes we get caught up in these boxes where people have to either be evil or good, right? People can't be mistaken. They can't be misunderstood. For example, the GC, the minor. I mean, was she lying? I'm not suggesting that she was lying, but I think the more plausible explanation is that she probably, if she wasn't telling the truth, it probably had more to do with the fact that she was young, she was a minor. She's been around Mrs. Cobb, for years and wants her dad out of prison. And so this idea that the defense is trying to paint that grandma was a part of the conspiracy to kill, I think is a bridge too far. And I don't think it's necessary. I think you can make a plausible argument that grandma has an interest, a vested interest, and that call clearly was, there were some things that were said in that call by the defendant that are troubling. But if you really want to give people the benefit of the doubt, that call was full, at least what we heard, which you've already discussed, was full of leading questions and testimony. So is it plausible that this young woman was, yeah, mom, yeah, mother-in-law, okay, to protect her own vested interests? I don't think that's so unreasonable, unlike the defense position that grandma had something to do with this murder and is part of this conspiracy, 6 years later. I think that's a bridge too far.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Like I said, it's not plausible to me, but I think what it does is it just gives the jury this idea that it's very possible someone else could have made that call and that person not be Erika Stefanko. How much of a problem is it, Jamie, do you think the time issue is? Because that's one of the areas where I struggle, is that Mom had this stuff and she sat on it for a while, quite a while, 3 years. That to me is problematic.
Yeah, it's problematic on multiple witnesses that we've heard from during the course of this trial that have come out now years after the fact. And I think that there's been quite a hoodoo made over this idea that Mr. Cobb has nothing to gain from his actions recently of sending the letter to detectives leading to the prosecution of Erika Stefanko. And I don't agree with that. I can tell you that in the jurisdiction where I live currently, our elected prosecutor has come under extraordinary scrutiny because she has publicly said that she does not believe that convictions that don't involve a possibility of parole, she believes they're not appropriate, not constitutional, and she's made that a cause of hers. And she doesn't share that opinion by herself. So, this gentleman is in prison for life, no possibility of parole. The idea that he doesn't hope to get something out of this at some point in time, I think is I think that we'd be making a mistake to rule that out as part of his motivations. So, this idea, again, that everybody is up to something or they're innocent is not an appropriate way to look at human behavior. And I think when you look at the behavior of Miss Cobb, when you look at the behavior of this young woman, the minor in this case, and really looking at the behavior of Mr. Cobb himself, at least post-conviction, I think that there are so many plausible explanations for the discrepancies in the evidence that the jury is going to have no choice but to find this woman not guilty if they truly look at it through the lens of guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, Jamie, see what you just mentioned, I want to comment on, because I think when Chad Cobb went as far as to say it wasn't him who actually strangled the victim in this case. I think these are people who don't know the law, and they think if they get that on the record here, they might get him some sort of appeal where he can bring that in and maybe get his sentence reduced or at least get parole back on the table. That's what I think.
I don't disagree with you. I think that the idea that he doesn't have a dog in this fight and he's just out to do, good at this point in time, maybe that's true, but to me, it just doesn't seem reasonable. I think this man has probably sat around for years trying to figure out how he can get out from underneath this thing. And then, what I don't think enough attention was put into is that really these allegations came out after, in large part, after his best friend went and, married his ex-wife. So, there's just, to me, seems to be so many mechanisms associated with ulterior motives that for a jury to go back and convict her on a call where her mother-in-law was literally leading her for 3 hours of conversation, suggesting answers. And while she did appear to admit some involvement in making these calls and this plot, I think we all can relate to being in a situation where somebody is coming at you, and the dispute is not worth the effort. Yeah. And that's where I am with it.
Yeah, I think I might be. You might have pushed me over to the other side there. This thing may be so much of a mess that the jurors just can't make heads or tails of it and don't want to convict somebody on it being such a mess. Well, Jamie White,
and I think we're seeing that the 9 hours of deliberations with very little physical evidence that they need to review.
Exactly. All right, Jamie White, thank you so much for being with us and providing your expertise. I really appreciated it and enjoyed it. So you have a great evening.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you for having me.